Okay, for notes 3.5, we're going to talk about some other ways that lead to bias, okay, in surveys. So we had talked about the other day voluntary response. Like if I just set up a table in the cafeteria and ask people to come up and answer a question, we get voluntary response. Only those that really care about the question are going to come up. Also convenience sampling. If it's easy to do, it's not very good representation. If I just pick on a big box of apples, if I just pick the top ones to sample, very easy to do, but not a good representation of all of them in the inside. Okay, so we talked about those earlier. Today we're going to talk about a couple more. We're going to talk about undercoverage, and we're going to talk about non-response, and we'll also talk about response bias. Okay, so some more vocabulary for you to learn here. Okay, so here's an example of undercoverage. Okay, some samples are selected by randomly calling landlines. Okay, so I don't know how many of you guys still have a landline in your house. We don't anymore. We just have cell phones. But if they do a sample, say they want to do the whole U.S. population, but they only call landlines. Okay, so is only those people with landlines, is that a good representation of the whole U.S. population? No. Older people, like my parents, they still have a landline, but younger people are switching to only cell phones. So those people would be left out. So this is undercoverage. Okay? It occurs when members of a population are less likely to be chosen or cannot be chosen for the sample. Those with cell phones only wouldn't be covered, right? We have undercoverage there. Okay, so here's another example. How long before school do students get out of bed on average? Administrators survey a random sample of students on each school bus one morning. How is there undercoverage with that? Okay, think about how it's done. They're surveying people, surveying students on each school bus one morning. Okay, think about the people that they're surveying are the people on a bus. Are those people maybe going to have a different result, different answer than the whole population? Okay. Students who take the bus probably wake up earlier than those students who get miss the bus or get dropped off by their parents because they have a longer bus ride to get there. So it only includes the people on the bus, therefore not other students, therefore we have some undercoverage, so not everyone is represented. Okay. Another thing is non-response. So let's say we did a simple random sample and we did a great job with it. Okay, we have the whole U.S. population. Well, we'll take school. We take the whole school. We make an alphabetized list from A to Z. We number them and we choose, certain people to survey. We've done a perfect job. Does that mean that these people are going to respond? No, there's no guarantee those are going to respond. So that's the idea of non-response. We do a survey and we do it well. Okay, we design it very well, but maybe some people can't be contacted or they just refuse to participate. And that leads to bias as well. Consider a telephone survey that asks people how many hours of television they watch per day. And people are selected, but maybe they can't be reached because they're outside the house and they're not able to respond. They're not home. I think the people that are out of the house and not home probably have a very different answer than those that are at home, which might be watching TV more. So that creates some bias in what we're trying to obtain, the number of hours. Okay. This is very interesting. Nate Silver is he started a major website and polling industry. Yeah, anyway, you can look it up sometime if you want. But he says response rates to political will approve of the president's rating. The people are going to vote for whoever. They make every effort to try and contact a good representative population. They do an excellent job of identifying who want to ask, but they only get around 10% of the people to to their surveys. I know me personally, when I get a call on the telephone, if I don't recognize the number, I may not pick it up. Also, if they start out by, it seems like a caller, that's trying to ask me something or fish some information out of me, I am more likely to say no thanks and hang up. They only get about 10% of the people to complete their surveys about that. I mean, it used to be back in the 90s about 35%, which was better, but 10%. That makes our polls not nearly as accurate as what they could be. Okay? So it creates some bias in the response. Also think about the direction of the bias. Is it going to be overestimating or underestimating what the true population is? Okay, so here's an example. 300 people participated in a free 12-week weight loss course at a community health clinic. 300 people. After 1 year, administrators emailed each of the 300 participants to see how much weight they had lost since the end of the course. Only 56 people responded. Now, why do you think only 56 out of the 300 people responded? And what kind of people responded to that? So of the 56, the mean was they lost 13.6 pounds. How might non-response lead to bias in this study? Okay, so think about who's more likely to respond to the survey? The people that are proud to have lost some weight, right? Okay, so probably these 56 people are people who have lost weight. The other people were too embarrassed or didn't, I didn't lose any weight. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I'm not going to respond to this. I don't want to give my opinion, right? So that probably leads to an estimate is likely larger than what the true weight loss for all 300 people is. Okay, so we have direction to it as well. So we have non-response. A lot of people, 244 people, didn't respond to this survey, which creates bias in the results, overestimating what the true population is. Okay, now think about the difference between voluntary response and non-response. Can you think about the difference there? Voluntary response is we're just setting up an area. People can voluntarily respond to it. We have something on an email or a website. People can voluntarily respond to it. Non-response means they have been identified but refuse to answer. Okay, so those two things can be mixed up sometimes. But voluntary response, nobody's been identified. They're just volunteering their response. Non-response is they have been identified to participate in the survey, but they just refuse to answer. Okay? Now the other type we're going to talk about today is response bias. Okay, the definition, when there is a consistent pattern of inaccurate responses. So for example, let's say there's a dentist and they ask all their patients, do you floss? Okay? Do you think the response that he or she gets is a real accurate representation of the whole population that she has? Absolutely not. I think if a dentist is asking you if you floss when you're there, you're more likely to maybe lie and fib a little bit and say, yeah, I'd floss, even if you don't. Okay? So that creates some bias as well. So how people respond is also. So one type of response bias is lying. Okay? They don't tell the truth. Okay? Also, okay, so is cheerleading a sport? Haley surveyed students at her school. When she was dressed as a cheerleader, 80% of the people said, yes, it's a sport. When so is asking also makes a difference. Okay, and how people respond. Okay, also, do Americans doubt that the Holocaust ever occurred? So a badly worded question can also make different results. So here's the question. Does it seem possible or does it seem impossible that that the Nazi extermination of the Jews never happened? So it kind of includes a double negative, which can confuse people about what the question is actually asking. So when they they rephrased it, they got very different results, okay, to that worded question. So the wording of the question also creates a response bias from people, okay? So what percent of Americans wash their hands after using the bathroom? Okay, it depends on how you collect the data. In a telephone survey of 1,006 adults, 96% said they always wash their hands after using public restroom. Do you think that's really true? An observational study of, okay, so now if we just observe people, of 6,028 people coming out of bathrooms, only 85% were observed washing their hands. Why do you think there's a difference in the two results? Okay, I think people might be lying. Okay, they might feel some pressure. Yeah, I should be washing my hands. That's why I'm going to say, yeah, I always wash my hands. When in actuality, maybe I don't always. Okay. So here's a little cartoon, Calvin and Hobbes. I'm filling out a reader survey for Chewing Magazine. See, they ask how much money I spend on gum each week, so I put $500. For my age, I put 43. And when they asked what my favorite flavor is, I wrote garlic curry. Says this magazine should have some amusing ads soon. He says, I love messing with data. Yeah, so people could just out of fun of it be messing with data just to make it look bad. Okay, so completely avoiding bias when conducting a survey is likely almost impossible to do. But there are good things to think about. Make sure you're selecting a random sample. That's a good start. And then try and take steps to avoid undercoverage. Make sure everybody can answer. Make sure you don't have non-response. Do the best that you can, to get responses from people. Try and track them down. Try and visit them, different things. With the U.S. Census, there's non-response, right? A lot of people don't respond. So they send people out to homes and try and get people to respond. So, yeah, bias can make surveys, if you can reduce it, it makes the surveys more accurate and better. Okay. Finally, you can make out the wording of your sample as well. Make sure it's worded correctly. You might try it out on a couple people before you actually take it and do the survey. Now, this is something that really happened a couple years ago, not just a couple years ago, in 1936. Okay, there was a big magazine called Literary Digest. They sent over 10 million ballots out to its subscribers. So there's a lot of people read this magazine. And they had about 2,400,000 people return their survey. And they had about 57% favoring Ralph Landon over Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, so they, from their survey, which is a huge sample, over 2,400,000 people said that they would approve of Alf Landon over Roosevelt. Okay, now think about this. It also says they also sent ballots out to owners of automobiles or telephones. Now, so I'll let you answer this question. How would undercoverage lead to bias in the survey? So think about who is being surveyed and who is not being covered in this survey. Okay, so they sent it out to their readers and people that owned automobiles and people who owned phones. In 1936, what kind of person got this magazine and had automobiles and phones? The rich. Okay, the rich people did. So under coverage, they surveyed the rich, but they didn't have the poorer people included. How is non-response in this bias? Response. They had 10 million ballots sent out and only 2.4 million sent in. Okay, so there's some non-response there as well. So quite a lot of people did not return the survey. Probably those that were more in favor of Alf responded. Okay. Now that same year, George Gallup also did it, and he predicted Roosevelt would win. and he was not very well known and much smaller sample size, but he was able to predict with more accuracy because he thought about avoiding the bias and got a better representation of the population. And that's where we get the Gallup polls today, okay, which is a huge organization that does it in a very fair way. So if the magazine followed up with people who didn't their ballot and was able to obtain responses, would this eliminate the bias? It would eliminate the non-response bias, but it wouldn't eliminate the undercoverage. We still only send it out to the rich people, not necessarily everyone who's going to vote. Okay? So that is our notes for today. Hopefully you are able to explain undercoverage, non-response, and some other things like response bias, which was like lying, who was asking the question, and the wording of the question.